Mrs. Catherine White, who's been coming here for at least, 10 years, maybe more?
2012.
2012, that's a long time. It's almost as long as we've been around. Her topic is specks and logs. I suspect that comes from the Bible, what Jesus said, and it should be an excellent class because today a lot of people look down upon the great founders and specks and logs. So, Mrs. Catherine White, this will be her last class of this camp, so give her a nice warm hand. Thank you.
In addition to the scheduled talk, Mr. Shurtleff has asked me to add some information at the end about the Constitution in general, which is one of those little God things that happens because this particular presentation I was a little concerned about because it was a little short. I rushed the other one, so it turned out to be short. And this one was just going to be short, and now when I add in the rest, it'll be just exactly the perfect time. So thank you, Lord, for making me not flesh this one out more. I have also been asked to tell people that there are a whole stack of Boston Broadside magazines, newspapers, in the back. These are free. And they have all sorts of wonderful articles in them. It is a subscription magazine if you or your family wants to subscribe, but the stack that's here is free, and there are articles by me in it monthly, just about, and by Mrs. Lynch as well. She's in there too. So you are surrounded by famous authors. I'm sorry, what? I do not know if Mr. Shurtleff is in this one. He said that his articles are sporadic. All right, so. The rest of you can fetch your own. All right, tonight's presentation here for you is seeing the specks in the eyes of our founders despite the logs that are in our own eyes. How can you say to your brother, "Brother, let me take the speck that's in your eye"? Take out the speck that's in your eye, when you yourself do not see the log that is in your own eye. You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take out the speck that is in your brother's eye. So yes, Mr. Shurtleff was right. This is from the Bible. Luke chapter 6. There are errors and omissions in the Constitution. It is not a perfect document. There are items that were left out entirely. There were terms that are crucial, but that were never particularly well defined. There were deferrals of some crucial items to some Congress in the future, which might be cowardly, might be the exigencies of the time and the time limits they were working with, but there were items that were crucial that were deferred, and one of those items ended up with many hundreds of thousands dead about 100 years later. Okay? There were protections for the people that were missed. There were dangers that were ignored. There were paths for infiltration from those who mean us harm that were left wide open. There were assumptions made that everybody knew, so they were not stated. And they also looked backwards at problems that cropped up under King George, that cropped up under the Articles of Confederation, that were cropping up in interstate interactions. But they didn't look forward enough because they were looking backward. They did not seek to anticipate more problems in the future. They spent too much time looking back. But what we see of their errors is colored by our own misconceptions, our own assumptions, and our own errors that are all based in the culture that we are steeped in and the history that has happened since the Constitution was written until now. But if our sight is colored by errors, assumptions, and misconceptions, we can't define properly what the actual error is. And instead, we fix the wrong problem. Or we try using a method that's been tried before and doesn't work, or that, since it's not fixing the right problem, is going to backfire and cause a worse problem. So without clear and untainted sight, we can't analyze the Constitution. We can't identify and separate out and seek a remedy for its shortcomings. Nor can we evaluate any correction to those errors or omissions properly, because we can't see them properly. Our great strengths and our curious weaknesses trace to this. This was from my other presentation the other day. We recognize no sovereign but God, and no king but Jesus, said Pastor Jonas Clark of the Lexington Minutemen back in 1775. So what are the logs in our eyes? And how has this modern world twisted the way we see the founders' views, the way we approach the Constitution, the way we analyze what it says, the way we look at the problems that have cropped up in the intervening years? First of all, we've got a debased culture. We are no longer living in a moral, godly, Christian, rural, agricultural-based culture, right? We're secular, materialistic, and everything's going 17 million miles an hour, right? Instant isn't good enough anymore. We have to get things before we think of them, right? You know, you're going to have to wait 2 days for delivery. Oh, I can't wait that long. Right? So it's very frenetic. And morality is no longer seen by the culture as based on biblical truth. Instead, it's relative. Lots and lots and lots of people in the country have a gimme, 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 gimme mentality. Both hands out. I want, I want, I want. You've got some, give it to me. They demand without caring. They do not see that they have any duty or any responsibility to support the society and the culture that they live in. And anybody, like all of us here, who's seeking to live a godly, Christian, moral, upstanding life, we're met with derision, scorn, and we're told that we're religious extremists, domestic terrorists, enemies. But we're the people who are the bulwark of the country. So we can only see the founders' perspective by rejecting this maelstrom of nonsense and idiocy and cultural debasement that surrounds us. But you have to see it before you can reject it. And I will tell you that once you start to recognize the patterns, you can't go back. You start seeing the patterns everywhere. And then patterns within patterns. Once your eyes open, once your spiritual eyes open, they don't close again. We've had debased education, as Mr. Newman has been talking to us about, and Pastor Whitney as well. The theft of the duty of education from families to government sources. And of course, those government sources want greater government power, which leads them to refuse to teach the actual Constitution, including in law schools. And that ensures the continuing degradation and ignorance of our founding principles. And I will tell you that they have not taught the Constitution in the law schools for 100 years, at least. When I was in high school, I asked the teacher of my social studies class, I think it was, what the difference was between a republic and a democracy. She didn't know. Now, I know how old I was back in 10th grade, and I know what year it was, and I kind of back calculated from that how old the teacher was, she hadn't been forced to retire, so even though she seemed like she was 90 years older than God, she couldn't have been more than 63 or 64 because she was still there a couple years later. So I back calculated when she would have graduated from college herself, and she would have graduated from college in the late 1930s. So the rot goes back at least that far, that someone who graduated from college learning to be a history teacher did not know the difference between a democracy and a republic in the 1930s. That's how far back. Right? Now everyone needs to have a college degree in order to pour coffee at Starbucks. The reason for the requirement for the college degree is because the schools graduate people from high school who can't read, who can't add 2 + 2 and reliably come up with 4, who can't calculate a tip, who can't do anything competently. So instead of studying advanced Latin in schools, they're now teaching remedial English in college. This also leads to generations of young adults who are enslaved to the debt for the college loans that, of course, the costs are so high because of the federal government's involvement, and more years for these children, young adults, and more to be brainwashed by the government monopoly schools. But today's college graduates are incapable of passing the 8th grade final exam from Salina, Kansas from 1895. And the next slide's going to show one question from each of 5 different areas. The kids were given, I think, 3 hours for the final exam, and there were 6 or 7 questions of equal or greater difficulty to the 5 I'm about to show you. Give 9 rules for the use of capital letters. Find the interest. Paper and pencil only, no calculators, no computers, no Excel. Find the interest of $512.60 for 8 months and 18 days at 7%. I'm an accountant, I could do it. Could any of you? Good, glad to see it. Relate the causes and results of the Revolutionary War. What are the following? And give examples of each. Trigraphs, subvocals, diphthongs, cognate letters, and linguals. That's the one that would trip me up, that's for sure. Why is the Atlantic coast colder than the Pacific in the same latitude? This was 8th grade. 8th grade in 1895. And you had to get these right to get your diploma. Debasement of government. Government's now seen as a sugar daddy. It provides everything to everyone. Your rights are now privileges. They are revocable by government decree. You can't go to church. You can't go out without a mask. You can't get a job unless you submit yourself to experimental medical treatments. Government decree. The cost, of course, of the sugar daddy is only our conscience and our freedom. Minor thing, right? The states are in nearly full collusion with the federal behemoth for power and money, ignoring the fact that the money that they're getting back from the feds came out of our pockets to start with, right? And a lot of it stays in Washington, right? The senators and representatives who come back into your state saying, look at the federal $1,000 I brought back from Washington for projects in our state. Well, it started out with $3,000 that went to Washington, and $2,000 stayed in Washington, and $1,000 came back. Oh, that's a great deal. Sign me up for double. The bureaucratic state now only sees value in people as pawns, sources to be exploited, and NPCs, non-personnel characters, to provide additional excuses for more restrictions on lawful citizens. So the federal government is now far more tyrannical than the government under George III by far. Amen. We've got debasement of law. Precedent case law and precedent, it's a dangerous basis for major decisions. It's sold to attorneys and judges as a way to ensure equitable application of the law. But remember, evil inverts everything, right? So something that's meant to ensure equitable application of law ensures inequitable application of law, and every decision moves you farther away from any constitutional basis. If this is the constitutional basis, your first decision is here, and then you base the next decision on precedent, and it's here, and the third is here, and the fourth is here, and the fifth is here, and 200 years down the road, you're up here. Nowhere near a constitutional basis. But it's case law, it's precedent. It is, under federal rules and too many state rules, far too difficult to remove judges who adjudicate cases on a basis other than the constitutional application of the appropriate constitutional laws. And blind justice has been replaced by restorative justice, which, when translated into vernacular, is bias against Christians, conservatives, whites, and U.S. citizens. There's non-comprehension of the Constitution. Distraction leads to ignorance. It's not just TV and our cell phones and sports, but crushing debt loads, mortgages, student loans, etc. Wages that are far too low to support a family on, so you end up with multiple jobs, living 3 hours from where you work, and more. And all of it is nurtured very carefully by the players behind the scenes. The schools now teach a living constitution, and that it is irrelevant, so why bother reading all that boring old junk that doesn't apply anyways? Right? The plain text of the document is explained away as, well, they didn't really mean it that way, or oh, that doesn't apply to us now, we're modern and they're like old fogies. It's all part of the plan. So if you want to overturn the devil's plans, read the Constitution and learn it. The Enlightenment. This was very popular in 1787. Its original sin was that it was man-centered, not God-centered. In fact, it is God-disdaining. But that aspect of the Enlightenment philosophy was carefully hidden, because that's the way the devil always works. You hide the poison and sugarcoat it, and then it looks attractive and it looks smart and it looks like the greatest thing since sliced bread, and let's do this, and before you know, you've swallowed the poison. They started demanding the application of the methods of natural or material sciences to the spiritual realm, but you can't prove spiritual truths by material means. They use the wrong tools. It's like trying to use an oven thermometer to determine how cold your freezer is. It's the wrong tool. You're not going to get any result. So you're going to have wrong information about your freezer. And then, because they can't prove a spiritual truth by material means, then they say the spiritual is not real. That's all pagan, silly stuff that people who can't face reality go for, right? But they are very welcoming to any pagan or heathen gods. There's only one that they hate, and that's the one who's real, and his name is Jesus Christ. Now, as Professor Willie Soon would certainly agree with, this dishonesty, this fundamental dishonesty originating in the Enlightenment philosophies, leads to ignoring science's own rules whenever it serves the modern agenda, which is why you've got all the global warming nonsense, where they just take the rules of science and throw them out the window because it doesn't serve the agenda, yet they claim to stand on science. They pervert meaning. Freedom of speech is not freedom to blaspheme, nor is it freedom to promulgate anti-Christian and anti-Constitution systems. We are guaranteed in the Constitution a republican form of government. So that's not a monarchy, it's not a theocracy, it's not an oligarchy, it's not socialism, it's not communism, it's not tribalism, it's not a gazillion different isms. You want to live under one of those? There's plenty of them out there in the world. Pick one, go. I'll buy your ticket. Right? Freedom of speech is the freedom to speak against and disagree with current policies or persons in public life and to correct errors. That's now just called misinformation, but that's just censorship. But they've taken free speech and said that blasphemy is fine, but actually trying to correct incorrect policies is misinformation and subject to censorship. Crony capitalism is concentrating power in the hands of un-American, unelected men and government bureaucrats who are also not elected. So just a few examples with the Federal Reserve, the impoverishment of the general populace, which is a direct result of Federal Reserve policies, plus plenty more. Then this leads to calls for fairness and equity, which is asking for more government intervention. The church's charitable functions in medicine and education that have been hijacked by the government, and you end up concentrating power in the government, state and federal levels, for the benefit of corporations, unelected bureaucrats, NGOs, and to the detriment of the citizens whose rights are supposed to be being protected by that government. Then there's the propagation of liberal ideology. When everything is relative and based on feelings, there is no justice, there is no rule of law, and there is no moral base. And when law becomes subjective, it always results in multi-tiered non-justice. The elite get away with just about everything. The favored groups get away with an awful doggone lot. And the out-of-favor groups get blamed for everything that they don't even have any control over, and then told they complain too much. Societies based on subjective law inevitably collapse. We got all that baggage hanging in front of our eyes. We can't see. It's got to be cleared out. So see it, recognize it, evaluate everything according to the whole counsel of God, and reject everything that is not congruent with His word. Seek truth. Lee Brainerd has Soothkeep Ministries. Good guy. He's got a slogan that he uses. He says, truth. Truth above all else. Truth at any cost. So hold fast to truth. Who is truth? Jesus Christ. We hold fast to truth, then we will be able to see clearly the specks in the eyes of the founders and the errors that they made, and then we can evaluate improvements and figure out how to implement those best. Their specks: naivete, the Enlightenment, infiltration, subversion, proliferation of other faiths, enticement to empire, and how much vigilance was needed, right? They were naive. Most of the errors in the Constitution were basically innocence and naivete, which they'd probably be really embarrassed to realize. They never expected the drift away from Christianity towards secularism. They didn't even consider that the states would abandon their official state religions. They did not foresee the moral cowardice in Congress because they were risking their lives during the Revolutionary War. And they just didn't see moral cowards ahead of them. They never expected a federal government to become a sinecure, jobs in government to become a sinecure, whether in elected office or in the bureaucracy. They never expected high status in international affairs by the USA. We were a month's ocean journey away from anything in Europe. Why would we become important? They planned for a small government, too small to bother people during their day-to-day lives. But they didn't properly account for greed, demanding rules that promoted special interests, that then paid for more rules, that grew better profits, that then paid for more rules. The Enlightenment was another pitfall. It was seen as an application of rational processes to many areas of thought. but the heart of Enlightenment philosophy is a disgust of Christian faith disguised as humanism. Thomas Paine, who wrote Common Sense, also wrote another treatise called The Age of Reason, and he sent an advanced reader's copy to Benjamin Franklin for his comments, for his reactions. The Age of Reason argues against divine providence, and in part of Franklin's return letter, he said, "Burn this before it's seen by anybody else." And he says, "I intend this letter as proof of my friendship. As your friend, I'm telling you, burn this thing. Just burn it." But Paine did not. Humanism, from the Collins English Dictionary, is the denial of any power or moral value superior to that of humanity. It is rejection of religion in favor of the belief in the advancement of humanity by its own efforts. And Pastor Derek Prince says that the key words are denial and rejection, and that humanism is a very strong negative force. And I add that spiritual force permeates the world today, and keep in mind that rebellion and rejection are linked, and that rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. For infiltration and subversion, there are 3 entire presentations I've done in prior camps. They are all on YouTube. Go watch them again. I'm not gonna revisit everything that I spent hours presenting before. Among other things, I only have another 15 minutes. I'm not done. But they did not anticipate the proliferation of other faiths and the degradation of Christian culture. There was less than 1% non-Christian in the United States when the Constitution was written. The Hindu, Buddhist, some Jewish traditions, Muslim traditions, pagan, atheist, and others, they all dilute the Christian culture. And the sin of wanting to be inclusive and welcoming opens a path for the denigration and degradation of the traits that make people want to come here in the first place. And those traits are not reciprocated by the groups coming in. Right? The Hindus do not, in general, welcome other faiths to expand in India. The Buddhists do not allow it in Buddhist countries. The Muslims sure don't allow it. It is illegal to proselytize for Christianity in Israel. And the pagans, atheists, and other traditions are all equally unwelcoming. But we let them in with open arms, to our own detriment. And finally, most of the effort went into fixing weaknesses that had cropped up in the Articles of Confederation and addressing in greater detail the predations of the crown on the colonies. It's what they were sent to do. That was their job, and they did it. But that means that they didn't have much time or attention to spend on pondering future areas where the government could turn against its own citizenry. The areas that they did look at were places where the crown had acted, and those they addressed. But they didn't sit there thinking, well, how could this go south, and how do we fix it before it goes south? It wasn't what they were sent specifically to do, but they should have done more of it because they knew history. As far as enticement to empire, the founders wanted a country that wasn't embroiled in the unending warfare in Europe for territory, for jurisdiction, for religious dominance, for money, for power, for better wine, better olive oil, just because they got a nicer beach. Who knows? You go look at the history of Europe and it's just, will you people just stop fighting each other? They had things like the 100 Years' War that lasted over 100 years. And there were more than one of those, it's just that there's one that got the name. There is what author Philip K. Dick termed the empire that never ended. And that is the empire of the prince of the power of the air. Who is the prince of the power of the air? Satan. And his minions have been behind empire after empire after empire over the course of history. Start looking for the patterns, and the base of operations moves as geopolitical changes and technology changes. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Assyria, Greece, Rome, Great Britain, and now the US. The ultimate cause of desire for empire is servants of evil, who are Satan's human, willing minions, seeking to usurp God's timeline and establish an unassailable kingdom of Satan on earth. One of the things that just escaped them is how much vigilance, right? Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. But they didn't get how much vigilance that was. They said it was eternal. They knew you couldn't let your guard down for a minute, but how much? They just didn't get. And the quantity needed is in lockstep with the gradual deterioration of the culture of Christian religion as being a central tenet of the culture, the general degradation of that culture, and the distracting emergencies promulgated by the servants of evil. At some point, go and look up the major wars of this country since the Civil War, or the war between the states, whatever you want to call it, and see how many of them were started due to false flags. Hint, almost all. I mean, there might be one that escaped, but go look. Very, very, very repeatable pattern of false flags precipitating the country into a war that people didn't want. So, there is another scathing pattern that is very well known in history. Both quotes from Judges. There arose another generation after them which knew not the Lord, nor yet the works which he had done for Israel. So in the generation after Joshua started taking over in Israel, they were not there to see the amazing victories and everything else that the Lord provided them. And they forgot. And in the end, the very last verse of the book of Judges is horrifying when you then go on in the history of the people of Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. If you just read the sentence, it's like, oh, okay, every man did what was right, what he thought was right, that sounds good. No, it's actually horrible. Go read the book of, what's the one? Pastor, which one is it that the name is escaping me? The continued rebellion and fall, and God saving the people of Israel. Gideon and Judges. All right. So that's it for the part that I meant to cover. Are there any questions there that are short so I can do the next piece that Mr. Shurtleff asked me to do? Yes, Pastor.
Just want to make a mention, excellent point on case law. If people want to study more about that case law fraud, there's a DVD on my table, The Case Against Case Law.
The Case Against Case Law. Pastor Whitney has a DVD. Go buy it. Over, now's the hard work. You all got these little books. All right. I'm going to explain the whole thing to you in 8 minutes. Strap your seatbelts on. All right? This starts, we'll just start with Article 1. You ought to know the preamble by now. Article 1 covers the powers, duties, and limits of Congress, which consists of the House of Representatives, which is to represent the interests of the people, and the Senate, which is to represent the interests of the states as sovereign political entities, because the states are sharing their power with the federal government. So the Senate gets veto power and approval power on a lot of things the federal government wants to do, because the states have to approve it too. Article 1, Section 8 is one of the most crucial sections in the entire Constitution. It lists the areas where Congress is lawfully allowed to act. Depending on how closely you parse it out, there's like 17 items. Anything else Congress does outside of those 17 areas where they are authorized to act is unconstitutional, illegal, and if we as a people knew the Constitution, all of those laws would be null, void, and of no effect. But they get away with it because we don't know no better. Amen. Because we have been asleep at the switch. There's a couple things in Article 1, Section 10 that the states agree to let the federal government handle. Article 2 is the duties, privileges, responsibilities of the president in his several different areas of action. The president is not an elected king. The president is more like your town's hired town manager. The selectmen make the rules, the town manager is hired to implement those rules, but if those rules contravene state or federal law, the town manager's duty is to call in the town attorneys and say, can you take a look at this thing and tell me if this is legal or not, because I'm not going to enforce this if it's not legal. The president's duty is that if something has been passed unconstitutionally, he must not enforce that law. But if it is passed constitutionally in an area where the Constitution gives the federal government jurisdiction, he has no choice. He must enforce it, whether he wants to or not. Tell that to Barry Soetoro. Right? Yeah. Article 3 is the powers, the responsibilities, and the duties of the judiciary. And it also defines treason, and it has one of my favorite phrases in the entire Constitution in it. In Article 3, Section 3, it says, Congress shall have power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood. Meaning, if you're accused of treason and you're convicted of treason, it's just you. Your whole family isn't destroyed by it. Right? Your spouse is not a traitor unless they've committed treason themselves. Your kids get off scot-free. Your grandparents are fine. It does not work corruption of blood. All right? Article 4 is the interactions between the states and the federal government and procedures for admitting new territories and states. And it also guarantees every state a republic as their form of government. So all those places in Texas and Minnesota that want Sharia courts, sorry guys, unconstitutional, get out of Dodge. You want Sharia courts, you go to Saudi Arabia, they got them there. Okay? Article 5 is the way to amend the Constitution. If you found an error with it and you need to fix it, there's two ways to do it. God forbid we ever try for the second way. Article 6 states that all the debts that we took on under the Articles of Confederation to pay for the Revolutionary War, we promised to pay those back even though we're changing our form of government. No government had ever done that. But we promised to do it, and all those debts were indeed paid off. It also says, and this is the supremacy, this Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. Please note it does not say anything we can strong-arm Congress into passing and coerce a dementia patient into signing goes. That's not what it says. It says if the laws are made pursuant to the limitations and restrictions of the Constitution. And any treaties that are made in areas where the federal government has authority to act are the supreme law of the land. So there goes any climate change treaty, right? Any UN small arms ban treaty. The federal government has no authority to act in those areas. It has no authority to cede our sovereignty to any group, anywhere, at any time. End of story. They were not given the power. And that there's an oath of office required. Article 7 is the ratification method. Then there's the list of the signers, and then there is what's called the escatacol. It's the closing protocols. It's the formal close of the document saying who was there, that this is what they've resolved, that they're presenting it to the states and encouraging them to ratify it, and signed by George Washington under the unanimous order of the convention. There. Now you know everything about the Constitution. Ready to pass a test? If anyone has any questions about anything at any time, there's my email address. I don't check it every day, but I do eventually check it. ConstitutionDecoded.com. Me. Right? Catherine at ConstitutionDecoded.com. If you want a PDF of slides of any presentation I've done, just email me and I'll send you the PDFs. You can use them for any educational purpose, but please don't put your name on it and say that you did it, because that would be unfair to me, because I spend hours and hours on these things. All right. Any questions? Yeah. Any questions from the students first? Are you one of the students? Okay, you're just sitting all the way in the back with the grown-ups. Please stand up so I can hear you.
Why are you against the second wave of amendment?
Because that's the call for a constitutional convention. And the Constitutional Convention people say, whoa, there were lots of conventions back then. No, they're completely disingenuous. There were conventions back in the founders' days. They were generally small, limited to state or regional efforts, and had nothing to do with amending the Constitution. The one and only convention for the Constitution was the call in February of 1787, issued by the Continental Congress, that was for the sole and exclusive purpose, excuse me, I'm tired and hot, the sole and exclusive purpose of proposing amendments to the Articles of Confederation. And what they did was they took the Articles of Confederation, threw them out the window, wrote a new constitution with completely different set of ratification rules. There are at least 3 constitutions already written and waiting for a chance to be ratified at a constitutional convention. And if you read the ratification rules, it has nothing to do with going back to the states and getting 3/4 of the states. It's by acclamation of the delegates at the convention. And it won't be people like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Hancock, or any of those others at the Constitutional Convention. It'll be people like Nancy Pelosi, Lindsey Graham, yeah, and that kind of ilk that will end up being delegates to the convention. There was another question up towards, yes, sir.
You said that there were dangers the Constitution missed. Can you listen to at least 3 of them, sure?
At least 3, I already covered them. They
Sure. Very short.
very short. The debasement of Christian culture, the rise of empire, the rise of the bureaucratic state. Yes, sir.
How do you think that we should keep America a Christian country while all these other religions are being awesome?
How to keep America a Christian country? Well, first of all, we got to stop actively going after Christians. That is an excellent question that deserves a thoughtful answer that I am frankly too hot and too tired tonight to think up properly. Email it to me. And in fact, that would probably be a really good article for the Boston Broadside for me, so please email me that question. Okay? Anything else? If you think of something later, you know where to find me, at least until midday tomorrow, because I will be going home after lunch tomorrow. Okay? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have a question? No, you're just waving. Hi.